about continental drift. To understand why the oceans look the way they do, you need to understand continental drift. And, hello, here we go. And continental drift is the idea, going way back, that the continents actually move. Let me turn this out so we can see it a little bit better. Don't be playing games on your computers. You'll pay attention here. So, here are the continents as they once existed. All the continents used to be together in one large landmass called Pangea. Can you say Pangea?
Pangea.
And they have moved since then to their present locations. Now, this was not always understood. As a matter of fact, people used to not believe it at all. Until this guy came around. His name's Alfred Wegener. It's actually pronounced Wegener because he was a German scientist. And he said that the continents move. And everybody kind of, nah, they don't move. They're too big. How are they going to move? Impossible.
Is this number 4?
And so he had to come up with all of this different evidence that happened.
I was just asking
what were you going to ask? Chapter 4. Okay, chapter 4. And so he spent much of his life coming up with evidence for continental drift. And as we know now, it's not just the land masses that move, and this is where people get confused. It's not just the land masses that move, it's the bottoms of the ocean move too. People think that the continents are like floating around on the water or something like that. That's not true. The bottom of the oceans also move. All the plates of the earth are slowly moving all the time. Tectonic plates. Plate tectonics. Plate tectonics is the theory that gives the reason for continental drift.
Full of so much knowledge.
Very nice. So here's some of Wegener's proof that the continents actually move. When you look at fossils, Wegener looked at a lot of fossil evidence. So here's this fossil, Cygnognathus, is a kind of an early dinosaur, and you find its fossils in South America and in Africa, in this location right here. You find another type of fossil, Lystrosaurus, and it's spread. You find it in Antarctica, you find it in India, you find it in Africa. And so you can see this type of fern is spread through these different areas. How could these, let's just take this Cygnognathus, how could it get from South America to Africa if they were separated by a big ocean? This is a big organism. It can't swim. So that's what he was saying. And there's another one, that Mesosaurus is a freshwater reptile. It doesn't swim in the ocean, so how could it get both in South America and Africa? And if you line up all the data from all these different fossils, and these weren't the only ones, there were others that showed this, you end up seeing that the continents must have been connected at one point.
But they were actually, that on the map they're not actually touching, but they were actually all connected.
They were actually touching.
Right.
It's making them not touch on the map so that they look like the continents look today. But they actually were touching and looked a little different. Isn't that cool?
Mm-hmm.
He also looked at the different mountain ranges. The Appalachians are mountain ranges. Y'all know the Appalachians, right? They run kind of through North Georgia and Tennessee and North Carolina and Virginia, all up the East Coast. Well, those connected have the same types of rocks, the same age, the same radioactive elements in them as the eastern Greenland mountain range. So let's go back here. Oh, this doesn't show North America. Here we go. So there is a connection running along the mountain range all the way up through Greenland there. And now, after the movement of the continents, Greenland is widely separated. So that's what he was saying was this mountain range was continuous and became broken up when Greenland broke away from North America and moved off. And there are several mountain ranges that have the same thing happening with them throughout the Earth. So he looked at mountain ranges, he looked at rocks, he looked at fossils, and he came up with this. This is cool. This kind of shows it happening. And how long does that take?
12 days.
300 million years. About 300 million years. Maybe 400 million years. Isn't that cool? Now, one thing that you don't hear about this has actually happened about 5 times.
You want to cough
in
on my
Earth's
neck
history.
again?
We only hear about the most recent one. What happens with the continents, we figured out, is that they were once all together and they separate, and then they'll come back together. And they've done this about 5 times in the history of the planet. They've broken up and then come back together, and then broken up and then come back together.
Wouldn't they like?
We only kind of studied the most recent one, but they think this happens over and over. Yeah.
Wouldn't they converge like the other side?
And the other side, yeah, that's possible. That they converge somewhere else in some other configuration. They don't go back together the same way. They break up and move around and reconverge and break up. And so there's actually, if you Google it and look it up online, there are names for the most previous landmass is called Pangaea, but there are names for the other land masses too. And notice it breaks into like north and south parts. You see right here, there's a north part and a south part. You know what they called the when it first broke up? The northern part was called Gondwana, and the southern part was called Laurasia.
So does that mean that like seas like the Mediterranean Sea formed because they wouldn't like fit back together the right way?
Because they what?
They like wouldn't fit back together.
Well, yes, but also that there's a continental plate in there that has basalt on it in the way. So
Okay.
again, there's ocean plates too, which he didn't know back then. He didn't know how the continents moved. Wegener didn't know how the continents moved, and he didn't understand about ocean plates. Oh wait, there's video. Video footage.
Germany, 1911. A meteorologist named Alfred Wegener was browsing through some books when something caught his eye. A list.
Watch the video.
Germany,
Could be on the test.
1911. A meteorologist named Alfred Wegener was browsing through some books when something caught his eye. A list of identical plant and animal fossils that have been found on opposite sides of the Atlantic Ocean. Wegener was intrigued. How could the same species have gotten from one part of the world to another? He examined the eastern coast of South America and the western coast of Africa, and was struck how the shapes of the two coastlines might fit together. The more he looked, the more links he found. Species of land mammals in East Africa also inhabited the island of Madagascar. How did that happen? Did the animals evolve in both places at once? Or did they somehow cross from one land to the other, swimming hundreds of miles across the Indian Ocean? And then Wegener saw it all clearly. He realized that all the continents in the world had once formed a giant single landmass that he called Pangaea, from the Greek Pangaea, meaning all earth. It was in Pangaea that the plants and animals found on opposite sides of the world had once shared the same home. Then, over hundreds of millions of years, Pangaea had split apart and its jigsaw pieces had drifted to their present locations. Wegener called his theory Continental Drift. Wegener wasn't the first scientist to speculate that the Earth had once been dominated by a supercontinent, but he was the first to pull together all the evidence and make a strong case for it. Unfortunately, his peers weren't very receptive. There was no mechanism to explain how the continents might plow through the oceans. Continental drift was just too incredible to believe. As a result, his discovery was largely ignored.
The other scientists laughed at him. True story. They made fun of him. They're like, here's the guy that says continents move around. And everybody laughed at him. He's like, they do. And then finally the evidence was just too much. They couldn't ignore it anymore. Here's what we know now, that the continents sit on plates. And here are some of the plates. We are on the North American plate. And I want to show you something that's important that a lot of people don't get. On our North American plate is both land and ocean. Meaning granite here and basalt here. You remember that granite is lighter than basalt? So you need to think about the plate, this whole plate kind of floating on top of the liquid hot magma that's below it. Okay? So the center of, or the mantle of the earth has this kind of molten hot lava that the continents sit on. The granite is lighter than the basalt. So the basalt kind of sits down a ways. And the granite sits up a ways. And all the water sits on the lowest part, which is on top of the basalt, which is why the basalt is the ocean floor. I've explained this to you before?
Yeah.
So all of this on the North American plate is on one plate, and the whole plate is moving. Not just the continent. The continent is not moving separately from the ocean floor on our plate. The whole plate moves at once. So North America is moving that way. We're moving to the west. A year from now, the whole continent is going to be 1 inch that way. That's west. So, we'll be there next year. There next year. There next year. The whole thing's moving. Can you believe that? And not only that, the ocean floor is moving too. The whole thing's moving this way. And check it out, the Eurasian plate, that's moving the opposite way. And the African plate is moving that way. So, think about this for a minute. If this plate is moving this way, and the African plate is moving this way, what's happening in the middle there?
Trench.
Imagine two plates separated. What am I getting? What did I get there?
Liquid hot magma.
What about the liquid hot magma?
It turns into an island.
Oh, new islands.
I said volcano.
You're right, it is volcanoes. What happens is
New chain islands.
the plates are spreading apart, and this liquid hot magma comes up from underneath, and there are giant mountains made from volcanoes all along this crack right here. Some of the largest mountains in the world are along there, under the ocean. And we didn't know about any of it until recently. Because they only recently did soundings of the ocean floor, and they said, whoa, there's huge mountains underneath right here. And the other guys are like, no way. Yeah, look at the soundings. You dive under there, you see, now there's big mountains, there's volcanoes, and there's lava coming out the top of it. There's earthquakes as the plates move. It's crazy. That's all going on under the ocean. Isn't that cool?
Mhm.
And that's not only happening here, it's happening all along here. Anywhere where plates are separating from one another, you end up with huge mountain ranges. Anywhere where plates are slamming together, you get a lot of volcanoes and you get a lot of earthquakes. Where do we have a lot of earthquakes in North America?
California.
California, look right there. That's where the North American plate meets the Pacific plate. And the North American plate is sliding upward. The Pacific plate is also moving in that direction. But the North American plate is moving a little bit faster than the Pacific plate. And you get the Pacific plate here and the North American plate have what's called sliding friction, and they're like sliding past one another in here a little bit. If you put your hands together, everybody put their hands together real tightly. Put it real tightly like this. And then what I want you to do is I want you to push pretty hard, push them together pretty hard, and then try to slide one hand. And then you'll feel there's tension, and then it'll slip. Feel it slip?
Good job, Jason.
Now imagine if this plate slipped and you were standing on it. The earth would shake. That's an earthquake. We don't get earthquakes over here on the East Coast. You get earthquakes over here, right where all this is. That's where the two plates are meeting. And this plate right here is kind of slipping past this plate. Isn't that crazy? This is great. Here, this plate right here is moving this way. This is the plate that, this plate right here, where India is, I'm not sure, they don't have it labeled here. I think it's called the Indian plate. That thing has moved more than any other plate. It came from all the way down here. It was once, that was once connected way down here to the bottom of South America and Africa. And it broke off and it moved all the way up here and it slammed into this plate right here and it formed the highest mountains in the world right there. That's where Mount Everest is. You know what we call those mountains?
Himalayas.
The Himalayas. And man, those things are tall and they're still growing because that plate is still slamming into that plate. So you still get earthquakes, and the plates, whenever two masses of granite slam together, they just kind of pile up like that. It's like two cars hitting one another, and they just kind of crunch together, and when two cars crunch together, the hood comes up. You know what I'm talking about? And those are mountains. Like the hood coming up in your car, two cars that hit one another. And those are big mountains, man. Now, they won't continue to grow forever. You know why they won't just get taller and taller and eventually go out into outer space?
Why?
Gravity.
Gravity pulls them back down. And erosion also. Wind and rain hitting the mountain rubs on the rock and breaks up the rock. And so you have two competing forces. You have the force of two plates pushing together, pushing the mountains up, and then you have gravity and erosion pulling the mountains down. It makes it so mountains can only get so tall. And they can only get about as tall as Mount Everest is. Now, if you went on a different planet that had less gravity, you could have bigger mountains. The biggest mountains in the solar system are on what planet? Do you know? You can take astronomy.
Mars.
They're on Mars.
Hey.
The biggest mountains in the solar system are on Mars. And they're huge. There's a mountain there that's about
Thanks.
10 times as big as Everest. It's as big as the state of Texas. It's a giant mountain. It's called Olympus Mons.
It's got a little girth too.
Yeah, it's a big round mountain. It's way up. It would take months to climb. If you're on Mars. It'd take years to get to Mars. Take astronomy, we'll learn about that. So here we go. So in some places you have what's called seafloor spreading, where one plate is going one way and one plate is going the other, and you have lava coming up in between, and you get you'll end up getting mountains forming in these places. I don't know if you can see, but this is trying to show you the water, the clear water there, but at the bottom you see it's down and then it comes up right there. It comes up right there next to the opening. There's an opening in the middle where the lava comes out, but it builds up on either side and forms this what we call oceanic ridge. Now, if a plate is running into another plate, it'll often dive underneath that plate and go back down. And that's where you get a trench, a deep trench like the Mariana Trench. Let's go back. Let's look at the Nazca Plate right here. This Nazca Plate, they don't show an arrow, but it's going towards South America. And so this ocean plate is hitting this South American plate that has a bunch of granite on it. Think about this now. Granite is light, and basalt that makes up the ocean plate is heavy. What do you think is going to happen if a heavy plate is coming in and hitting a light plate?
It's going to go under.
It's going to go under it. Do it, George. And the Nazca Plate goes right under the South American plate. How does it go under it? It dives back into the mantle. And check this out. Watch my fingers here. If one is diving back in, it's going to drag the other plate down a bit, and it's going to make a deep V right there, and there's your trench. There is an incredibly deep trench right off the coast of South America, right there. If you want to go get us into some deep waters, just go off the coast of South America. There's a big trench right there. Isn't that cool? So here we go. There's the trench. Here's this plate diving under the next. Now, here's another thing you got to know. Volcanoes. How do they form? Well, check this out. This seafloor, as it...
Bless you.
Bless you.
Excusage.
Bless you.
This seafloor, as it dives under this plate, it has a lot of light material that was on the seafloor. Now let's think about ocean creatures that have shells, like scallops and clams and oysters and those things. You know all the mollusk shells that you find at the beach?
All too well.
When these things die in the ocean, the shells sink down and land on the bottom of the ocean. And they form kind of a layer of calcium carbonate, which is shell material, along with other dead bits of plants and animals that have fallen to the bottom. And the bottom has a whole lot of carbon and calcium and lighter materials on it.
Thank you.
Are you with me here, Tone? So when this plate goes diving under, a lot of the light material that was on the ocean floor gets real hot because it's in the liquid hot magma. Can you do that later? You just throw it away later? We got time. There you go. Check this out because you don't want to miss this, right?
Right.
Okay, so here's the ocean floor going underneath the plate. It gets real hot down here at this magma, and then it kind of boils off and goes up. The basalt will keep going down until it all melts. But this liquid, this hot organic debris comes up and pushes up the plate from underneath into volcanoes.
So lava is made out of shells?
Well, yeah, part of it, yeah. But it's also hot substances from the magma that are pulled up with it. So it's kind of a combination. It's rock, but it's also there's a lot of calcium and that sort of stuff. And it'll push up new mountains. It'll go underneath, and this the rock will be pushed upward and will form these volcanoes. And as this rock gets pushed upward, it cracks and makes little openings in it, that the lava can burn up through. And so you can get volcanic ranges that are produced by this hot substance pushing up the rock. Have you ever heard of the Aleutian Islands off the coast of Alaska? They're a big, long range of volcanic islands that are made in exactly this way. I'll show you where they are. Whoops. This Pacific plate is moving this way, is pushing under this plate, and where it goes under there, the material, the burned up material comes up and pushes up the Aleutian Islands. They go all along down this way. That's why that island range is there. The beauty of this theory is that it explains mountains, it explains island ranges, it explains trenches, it explains where all the volcanoes are, why earthquakes occur. What a great theory. It is to geology what evolution is to biology. It explains everything. And they were making fun of him for it. You want to see video footage? This is one of the coolest videos that I have. It shows it really well.
Because hot rock rises, heated by the Earth's core. Near the surface, the rocks...
He's kind of got an English accent. That's even cool.
It happens because hot rock rises, heated by the Earth's core. Near the surface, the rock spreads in two directions and goes sideways. It begins to lose heat. Eventually, the much cooler rock sinks back down. Through this spreading process, the Earth's crust is very slowly dragged apart. And it's this that ultimately causes the continents to move. Where the plates collide, the rock on the seafloor containing carbon from the dead plankton is carried deep into the Earth. As it descends, this layer of rock is heated, so the rock melts, releasing carbon dioxide. And gas is returned back into the atmosphere during an eruption. The remarkable cycle is complete.
How cool is that?
It happens because hot...
Okay, so let's just take a look at this. So they're showing these are ocean plates. These are basaltic plates. And here, coming from the center of the Earth, let me just turn down the volume so you get it. Where are they at? Let me mute it. Mute it. There we go. Okay, so you can see. So what layer of the Earth is this? Do y'all know?
Core.
That's the core, and that's the hottest part. That is so hot. I mean, burn you up. Quit if you went down there. You can't get down there. It's too far away. It heats up the mantle, which is lighter elements that make up rock. The core. You know what the core is made of?
Metals.
Mostly heavy metals. Yeah. And those get hot. Those are hot, and the heat pushes up some of the rock, and the rock rises, and this is sped up. They've greatly sped this up. So they're showing you just in a few seconds here what might take, several 100,000 years. But you can see the spread. The rock carries along the plate above it. It makes the plate is sliding along because the rock under it is moving. That shows it really well. We call that a convection cell. Back this up a little bit. This is convection is rising and then cooling and then falling. And that's what the mantle is just slowly doing underneath the Earth. And it's pulling apart the little plates on the top. Now here's a good example of a trench. Right there is a trench. This plate right here is going under this plate, and it's pulled this plate downward, and there you get these deep trenches. The trenches will only go down so deep because this plate right here will only bend so much. It's near these trenches that you get a lot of earthquakes. Every time this plate kind of slips, you'll get an earthquake. And the earthquakes originate from down here in the rock usually, but it'll shake the whole plate. And have you ever heard of a tsunami? Y'all heard of a tsunami?
Yes.
Here's how a tsunami happens. If you're ever asked, what's the most devastating, disastrous, natural? What's the most devastating natural disaster? It's tsunamis. They've killed more than hurricanes, tornadoes, earthquakes, tsunamis. What a tsunami is can you imagine that plate right there? Remember there's pressure, and what if this plate that's being pulled down right here, what if it slips? Imagine that big plate right there, the one the mouse is on. Imagine it slipping and going back. And remember, it's covered by water. So what's going to happen when this plate just goes up really quickly like that? It's a huge mass of area. It's going to push water. And that water will make a huge wave that moves across the ocean at about 600 miles an hour. And so if one happens out in the middle of the Atlantic, we've got about 3 hours from the middle of the Atlantic Ocean to the coast of St. Simons. Luckily, the middle of the Atlantic Ocean doesn't have plates like this, so we don't get them in the Atlantic Ocean. Plates are going together in the Pacific Ocean, and the Indian Ocean, and that's where usually you get tsunamis. And there was a tsunami y'all were alive for this one, the one off Japan that messed up the nuclear power plants?
Yes.
These tsunamis create huge waves, and there was one off the coast of Indonesia, and we're talking about killing hundreds of thousands of people. I mean, that are on the coast, and all of a sudden, people who don't know about tsunamis, and we do a day on tsunamis, I'll show you some video of all this. But the ocean goes way out because there's this huge mass of water, and the ocean goes way out, and people don't know what's going on, and they see all these fish just flopping around, and they go out and they collect in the fish, and the water goes out, and then it comes back in this huge wave, and it kills everybody. And it's about 20 or 30 feet higher than the normal high tide. And just washes way into the coast. It'll push cars and bridges and houses over. I mean, you wouldn't even be safe in a building with some of this. It'll just pull the whole building with it.
How many miles does it go?
It'll go in until the elevation is more than about 20 or 30 feet high, and then it'll just go back.
So like on St. Simons, would it?
It would, if we had a tsunami like they had in Japan and Indonesia, it would cover the whole island. You couldn't go anywhere. You could climb up an oak tree and hope the oak tree doesn't break off. Yeah, or maybe a real tall condo or house and hope that it doesn't remove the foundation. And it depends how far you are from the ocean, whether it'll remove the whole foundation. The further you are back away from the ocean, the better your house has a chance of withstanding it.
And you gotta wait for this.
Straight up the top.
Yeah, and then it goes back, and then the water will go back, and the coming back of the water is almost as powerful as the coming in of the water. So you get pushed this way, and then you get pulled back, and then often when you get slippage of the plate, it goes like that. It's not going to all slip at once. Sometimes it slips in segments. So you get one tsunami, and then another tsunami, and then another tsunami. It can be real devastating. So that's another thing in marine biology we'll want to look at, because tsunamis have shaped lots of things. Mass extinctions on the planet have happened because of a lot of volcanic activity and movement of plates, slamming of plates into one another. So here we go. See this thing creeping down? And then here's the hot car. He said plankton in the video. So when I said shells of organisms, most of the material at the bottom of the ocean is shells of plankton. You wouldn't think plankton have shells, but some of them do. And those shells are really make the sediment on the bottom of the ocean. And you can see here, that's carried, it gets hot and it's carried upward and it pushes on the plate and will come out through volcanoes. And that's why the volcanoes release. Have y'all ever heard volcanoes release huge amounts of carbon dioxide? Well, that's because it comes from the shells of these organisms that are made of carbon. And so that's why carbon dioxide comes out of volcanoes. Does the world make sense to you now?
Yes.
It should be a little better. That's what we're trying to do here. We're trying to make the world make sense. So, you've got about 7 minutes here. I want you to read this section. And then you won't have any homework. Thank you.